First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Otto and to Finland in general for the hospitality. I think going here to Finland is amazing. It has a lot of the similar thoughts on people and well-being as we have in Denmark. Uh, if I didn't live in Denmark, I think I would fit right in to Finland. So if something happens in Denmark, you know where to find me. I'm also really impressed with Mika, the minister, not having tunnel vision when it comes to gaming and esports, and opening it up in many ways, seeing it as a tool for well-being, seeing it as a tool of belonging and participation. I think it's really cool to see a minister who is looking so much forward into a world with gaming and esports and a digital youth and future. Also, I've been quite inspired by many of the talk today. Neurodivergence can be an advantage in many cases for esport players. I think if you did a survey on the professional esports players today, you would find some neurodivergence there. And I think esports and gaming really can contain a new type of audience that we haven't seen in sports in general before. So let's dive into it. Today I'll be talking a little about the Danish model of esports and how we do it, and also be talking about how we do well-being in practice. So first of all, my name is Christian. I have a bit of experience working with esports. We're running up close to 10 years now. I've been working with mainly esports associations. In Denmark, these are our clubs. They're organized as associations, which means they have a board. They're mainly run by volunteers. They have members, they have trainers, and so forth. It's quite a new thing having these associations in Denmark. I think we had approximately 4 or 5 of them in 2016. And I'll tell you a little about how that exploded from 2017 for several good reasons. I've been a part of co-developing approximately 200 esports associations. That's a lot, but I've also been working with the team. We have been several esports consultants running around town trying to figure out how to make these associations function in a great way. And I've also been a part of building the esports trainer education, the material itself, but also trying to expand it to a wider audience of pedagogues and teachers. And also these esport trainers, of course. It also has to be mentioned that there wasn't a thing called an esport trainer in 2016. There was an esport coach, and they were mainly focused on the professional teams, where these esport trainers is something that's more fitting for engaging the youth and learning how to play the game, but also learning how to be a good person and so forth, which a coach doesn't necessarily do. And then, I've also been a volunteer myself in a local anchored esports association called Copenhagen Esports. I've been the vice president of this little association, and I've also been a trainer for some kids in Counter-Strike 2. Currently, I'm just a member. I play Old Boys Counter-Strike. I've been playing Counter-Strike for 20 years. This is my jam. This is my game. I know you love it too, Otto. And I enjoy other games as well. I'm really a variety gamer, but this is the game that I head back to, and that goes for many gamers. I think they have like one main game that they go back to over and over again, but they try out new games with their friends and so forth. And then I've also been part of building a startup. So I've been working a lot with esport associations and so forth, but I've also been building an esport training platform for esport teams because I wanted to build like a system that could contain them and help them organize. I'm not a part of this startup anymore, though. Okay, let's talk a bit about what has happened in Denmark. So now you're seeing a bit of I had a little spoiler there, but it was because I wanted you to guess what happened in 2017. But now I think you understand it already if you saw the little logo in the bottom that I just made disappear. So we've had an explosion since 2017 of esports associations popping up. You can see the houses, that is associations, and the curve represents the members. We've had an increase in members, an increase in associations. As I said, in 2016, there were maybe 6 associations registered in total. So it really exploded from 2017, and that has to be accredited to Astralis in a big way, mainly because they were really good at putting esports out in the public debate. They're really good at pushing their success, which they had a ton of since January 2017, where they won one of the majors in Counter-Strike. And they even were invited to the City Hall of Copenhagen to have pancakes with the mayor, which is like something that big sports people do in Denmark. Super weird tradition. But it means that they really got recognition for being true sportsmen. And it just went on and on and on from there. And they became a brand that every kid knows and that even many plus 50s know, which is quite rare in esports. The only bit poor thing about that is that everyone thinks that, oh, you play esports, you must earn a lot of money. That's not the case necessarily if you play esports. You can play it as an amateur, as a semi-pro and everything, and there's only very few who earn that type of money. But we're working on broadening out the esport term in Denmark. I'm really happy that Australis, they push forward the debate because they've really been helping us getting out there and showing that gaming can be more than just playing games in your free time. All right. So we've had a bit of a dip after 2020. Obviously, there was Corona. We've had a dip in members, but we've especially had a dip in the esport associations coming from startup community and startup world. I also understand that there's a golden rule of 4 to 5 years after you established your startup, 9 out of 10, they close down again. And we have a structure in Denmark where it's quite easy to start up an esports association. And many of those who started up, they were part of an umbrella esports association. So they had football, they had handball, they had all different sorts of sports. And then they were like, let's try esports. It's the new cool thing. And then they had a bunch of volunteers, maybe some parents, maybe someone who really liked gaming or really wanted to go pro with their team, and had them made an association. But many of these associations were quite fragile. They didn't last for a long time. And as soon as the person who wanted to start it up, they left again, the association would fall apart. Where we see many of the associations that started up with a singular focus on doing esport, they still remain and they grow. So some of these associations, they created just around esports, not football, not handball, not anything else. They just focused on esports. They're getting stronger day by day and bigger. Okay, so we see that some are getting bigger, but we also see some shut down. To understand the players of Danish esports, and these are kind of old numbers, all of these, but they still prove the point. That is what matters. These are numbers that resemble the player distribution for prize earnings. So when you win in esports in Denmark, you are approximately 25 years of age, but it also scatters out. So you can go down to 15 years of age, but you can also go up to 40. But it's growing a bit. And that's also because the esport players are getting older. The ones who've been competing their entire life are getting older. So I'm curious to see where this ends in the future. Like, how old is the professional esport player actually? Are they 30? Is that the prime age for esports? There's something happening right now when people get children, which doesn't really suit the needs of becoming a good esport player, because having children means you need to spend time with them, depending on what type of parent you want to be, of course. I know in America you can have a nanny when they're no age at all, but I believe many want to spend time with their children, and practicing esports on a really high level requires a lot of hours every day, every week, every month, and a lot of traveling too. So, looking into the Danish association member statistics, we're looking at these games, Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, Counter-Strike being some of the main games out there. And you're thinking, is Roblox and Minecraft actually esports? Yes, no, maybe. This is the definition question. Many of the associations, they want to give a gaming, facilitated gaming experience to their members. And many of the members, they are at the age of 7 to 12 years old, which means they're not playing Counter-Strike yet. Some of them are maybe not even playing Fortnite yet. Maybe they're not allowed to do so. And many of them, they've maybe just started playing on desktop computers. So it's something really new for them. So going into something where it's like, it's really easy going, it's easy to learn, it doesn't really You don't get punished as hard when you fail, like in Fortnite and Counter-Strike, you get destroyed if you're not that good. But in Minecraft and Roblox, you have more socially oriented, building oriented, sandbox kind of games, and they have many different game modes. They're also filled with really bad mods and really bad game modes that you should be aware of. But that's why I think curated and facilitated gaming is everything when it comes to building a future with gaming and esports. Yeah, I'll get back to that. So understanding the core organization that works with esports in Denmark as like a sporting way, if you can say so. We have DGI. I used to work there building these organizations. We have DIF, where I work now as an esports consultant. We are the umbrella organization for all the different sports federation in Denmark, so football, handball, etc. And we have Esport Denmark. We actually have the chairman Lasse sitting here. Yeah. So, yeah, these are like the main organization working with sports in very different ways, and we're talking together. But there's actually nothing that is like putting us together. There's nothing that's like forcing us to collaborate. That's something that we've chosen and that hasn't been happening a lot for a lot of years. But that's because we now have some people who've been like engaged in each other's activities and so forth over many years, that we prioritize to do things together now. We didn't do that before. We even made like separate education, separate everything. So it's really good to see that we're starting to collaborate. So we are a part of the non-governmental organizations, but we also obviously have a lot of schools that are working with esports in different ways. The schools are all the way down to elementary schools who have subject lines with esports, where you can like do whatever type of normal elementary school thing you do, and then you have a line with esports, and maybe an esports room that maybe also the youth center uses in the afternoon, and maybe the esport club uses it in the evenings, or etc. We also have boarding schools. These are not hosted by the municipality. They're not like state regulated. They are private, most of them, which means that they decide how they want to do their esport programs themselves. From 2017 to 2019, we had 62 boarding schools starting esport as a major subject. Major subject. That means that this is like the big thing when you want to go to a boarding school. You have plenty of hours of esports, and they were filled with players. Some of them have shut down, just like we saw with the associations, because in order to get a good teacher, you need someone who's good with the kids, good at understanding boundaries because it's a boarding school, and good at understanding the game, because many of these players who went to the boarding school, who wanted to play there for an entire year of studying, they wanted to get better, and they wanted to be serious about it, many of them. Some of them also just wanted to have it as a leisure thing because they played at home. Of course, they should be able to play when they're at the boarding school. You cannot just throw away a leisure activity from a kid for an entire year. You need to embrace it in some way. So many, they invented these. And I have to say, there's a little over 100 boarding schools in Denmark. So it was like close to 60% of the boarding schools starting up these esports major lines. Yeah. Then we obviously also have the pro and private scene of esports. The pros are not really doing much with kids, except for promoting their teams and throwing viewing parties and so forth. But we also have a private sector who are doing esport training programs in esports centers and so forth, and they're doing it like similar to the associations, but they're doing it on other terms. Yeah. Apart from that, we have the municipalities working around the upper secondary education, which I haven't talked about, and the elementary school and the universities. Or the universities, they're actually a part of the state, but the municipalities, they set the guidelines together with the elementary schools and the upper secondary schools, who are part of the municipality. They also, in Copenhagen, for instance, make it easier, or they actually give money to hosting large events in order to attract tourists. We've had two large events in Copenhagen who have been given a grant. It's been Blast, who's been hosting huge international esport tournaments, and we've also had something called Copenhagen Gaming Week. It was just here in the winter holidays, where they had 30,000 mainly families with kids interested in gaming coming out, trying different games, hosting a huge event right there. But that's the municipality supporting it because they understand large events with gaming makes the municipality interesting, and it gives tourism and it creates jobs and so forth and so forth. So it's also an investment, so to speak. And then we also have the municipality supporting special needs, like we've just been talking about with disability, like we've just been talking about with neurodivergence and so forth. We have a lot of students out there who are super interested in gaming. It's a big part of their lives. And having these special needs educations and kind of like mixing that with gaming makes a lot of sense. Both to get the focus, the concentration, making the students stay longer and making it more meaningful for them to be there. Also because you can teach kids stuff through games. You can teach them math, you can teach them different sort of historical things and so forth. There's a lot on that too. Yeah, I won't be diving into psychiatry, but that's also a new branch that has been opened up recently, where psychiatric patients are actually playing Counter-Strike and so forth. You would think like, is this a good idea? It works really well. So the studies say that they have approved. I won't be talking much about the handicaps and so forth because we've been through that today. So diving into like a little resume of this, we have many organizations working with esports in different ways. And there are many different approaches, but there's only little forced collaboration, I'd say. Many are working individually with gaming and esports on the like circumstances that make sense to them. But we're not forced to work together. And I'd love to see a Danish gaming esports strategy that is more combined in the future. I'm also a part, together with Lasse, in the Ministry of Culture's expert group. We're 8 people there from the industry and from the association and sporting world. And we're trying to discuss like how should the future of gaming and esport be facilitated in Denmark. And I hope to provoke them to have something that is more gathered than disbanded. So why is it that this healthy esport and these healthy esport environments don't just happen by accident? There are several good reasons for this. One of them is that esports and gaming is in general super commercialized. When I say commercialized, I mean they want you as a customer to spend as much time and as much money as possible on the game that you're playing. It makes sense when you're a game developer to have your customers sharing the game with others, playing with others, spending a lot of time, spending everything you have on the game, because that's what keeps the company going, and that's what makes them capable of building new games or making the game even better. So they're also doing it for the customer. But sometimes we lack some regulation. We lack some rules regarding what you can give to kids, what you can't give to kids in the games. You have gambling options in some of the main games titles, where it's possible to just like roll the casino handle and just see what comes out for a little amount of money. And many of the kids are exposed with all of these things that you can buy with microtransactions on a daily basis. And many of these things are poorly regulated and are starting to become more regulated. It's something that the European Parliament is aware of, and the EU in general is aware of, and starting to discussing with these international game developers. But they are also international game developers, so they have a lot of say themselves in this matter. When it comes to American tech, we've all been talking about it probably, but there has to be like some sort of discussion going on here, and there has to be some sort of regulation. And if you can't make them regulate anything, the only thing you can do is talk to the kids who are using the tools about how to use it and what they are trying to make you do. And that will be more like an educational way of handling this issue. And it's also super time demanding, as I talked about before. If you are in a position where you want to get good at esports, or if you want to get better, becoming a professional esport athlete demands a huge amount of time compared to swimming, handball, football. The amount of training you need to do in a week is extremely much. So I'd say like swimming, maybe you're an elite swimmer, you swim 24 hours a week, which is a lot. An esport player would be like, that's nothing. That would be like, that's not even a full-time job. Because an esport player would have a full-time job with their team, then they would go home and eat, and then they would log on until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the night, and they'll be playing single player in order to just improve themselves because they can. Because they can always just log on. They can log on in the evening and they'll still get the competition they need to improve. But football players, handball players, they need to like schedule it with others, and they need to have like a field where they can go and practice and so forth. Esport is 24/7 option of getting better. Of course, playing more doesn't necessarily make you better. You need to practice well, but there's a fierce competition in esports in general. As it's been talked about earlier, there's also a lot of toxicity. I accredit this to the anonymous nature of esports and gaming. Everyone is anonymous, and the internet, you know it from Facebook and everywhere else, and the comment sections. People can tend to get really aggressive and tell how they think about your gameplay. And I think that this withholds a lot of females from entering the gaming and esport arena. I also think it is something that you can only work on by standing in front of a person that you're playing with. And what I've seen when I've been a coach in an esports association is that you talk differently than you do online with your friends, but also to your enemies. It's like you have a common understanding of what's okay when you have the eye contact with someone else. I'd even go as far as saying you talk differently when you've like had a bit of physical interaction with someone else. And that's also why we in Div, we make a lot of esport and physical activity courses for the associations, because we want them to bond. And the physical activities is more like play, fun, because they're like 7 to 12 years old. They don't care if they're playing online or if they're playing a real life game of, this is Fortnite, let's play Fortnite in real life or something like that. They just want to have fun. So that's why I think we can counter these like underlying things that is a part of gaming and esports by having these physical meets or some frames around it. Yeah. So what is well-being, and how do you put it into practice in these esport associations? This is Billund Esport, one of the associations. They're doing a pass the ball around, say your name, remember a weapon from Fortnite, different sort of games, like having fun, having a good time. I think that should be a part of every esports activity when you're young. When you're older, it's more about competition. It's more about getting better in performance. Then you should learn about that. My dream is kind of like that you need to have every kid through an esports association or through some sort of facilitated gaming throughout their childhood, so then they learn how to talk, how to act, how to communicate, how to be together with your teammates and so on. They don't need to be their entire lives. They don't need to be in the esports association from their young to their old. But I think they should come through it as some sort of a course at least. That's my opinion on it. So I have 5 quick points on well-being in esports, and I'll take you through the first one here. First of all, esports in Denmark is organized according to traditional Danish sport club ethical principles. This is something that NESS and other and other organizations have been making together. It's an ethical codex that they've all signed. The codex says, it's in Danish, I'll translate it. It says fair play obviously has to be a part of what we're doing. Fair play, no cheating, no when you have sportsmanship. So when you're playing a game, you treat each other nicely. When you're done with the game, you write GG, so on. It just has to be a part of it. No gambling, no opening of cases, no betting, no all of these different things. It has to be a place without alcohol, energy drinks, drugs, all of these things that are not part of sports organizations either. We have like dropped it into this ethical codex. It also talks about nutrition, movement, and rest, and well-being in general. And that's because we have opinions on these matters in the associations. When you create an association, you need to have an opinion that is well-being oriented. You cannot just open an internet cafe. I'll get back to that later. but you need to have you need to move people in the right direction, and we have a lot of talks with the boards in these associations and the trainers about what does that really mean. Like how do you say it to the kids in the training sessions? How do you guide them through what is good nutrition? How much should you rest? How much should you rest during the night if you want to be a good professional player? Because what does it do to your memory? What does it do to your skill if you only sleep 6 hours a night? Then we have number 2. Grassroots esports have to foster digital literacy, healthy habits, and open supportive communities through their gaming activities. Yeah, they have to be more than internet cafes. What does that mean? It means that they need to have a purpose. They need to they need to have some sort of goal with the training. It could be that you want to be socially together, that you want to build trust in between people. It could be building a community. It could be building respect. It could be building skills. Maybe you want to get better at the game. Maybe you need to have a goal. You need to, and the goal can be super simple. It could be treat each other nicely, but there needs to be a goal, and it needs to be driven by someone. Yeah, and there needs to be open weekly activities, which means that you need to have a weekly activity in your association. If you want to open an association, there has to be something going on on a regular basis. You don't need to be physically together. There are associations who have weekly activities online, and then they meet maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year at LAN events. That's fine. It can still function. And there has to be grown-ups involved in some way. Some of the associations, they have grown-ups who are trainers. Some of them, they have grown-ups who are the ones opening the door and making sure that the ones who get sad, they they get comfort. And then they have maybe a younger trainer who's been taking a course at one of the main organizations, and who's capable of doing these more game-oriented training sessions, or maybe having them on a Minecraft server where they do small things together, or they have small tasks together. The main thing is that there's a game master who makes sure that there's some sort of direction in the game, and there is someone who's making sure that there's a grown-up present, and the grown-up has to know how to deal with if they're not having a good time together. Then we have the third one, volunteers. They're everything in Danish esports. We are totally dependent on these. Recruiting them is hard. Making them stay is even harder. The volunteers are harder to get for many reasons in esports, because the parents are too scared to get involved many a times. They think that their child is the digital expert in the house, which often is sort of true. But that doesn't mean that they can't learn or they can't be valuable in an esports association. But many of them are too scared to take the first step and become a part of the association as a volunteer. They could just open the room and they could comfort the ones who are sad, and then you could have someone else taking care of the game. But many of the parents are too scared to get involved in the first place. Also, too many parents have too much free time activities and other things that makes them incapable of engaging themselves in the esports associations. So you need to find someone who's good at the game, but also good at being together with the kids without necessarily having a kid in the association. And that's usually the structure in Denmark, that you are a trainer, especially for the kids in the younger years, if you have a kid in the club or on the team, and then you engage yourself as a parent. So this is a huge bottleneck in Denmark, having good trainers. That's also why we see some of the members don't really find what they want when they join the esports associations, because maybe the trainer is someone who doesn't know what they need to know to get what they want. But we're really trying to improve the product quality of going to an association and make a good match between those who want to go and play. Do you want to play for fun? Do you want to play for companionship? Do you want to play for going pro? Why are you here? And then we try to mix it with the appropriate trainer setup. This is an important part to understand when you're here in Finland. I think we are anchored locally and by municipal support in the Danish esports structure. So it is so that we have these associations. You can become an people enlightening association by applying for it. But you need to have these activities, you need to have a board, you need to commit yourself with papers, you need to apply for facilities and so forth. So you commit yourself a lot to this setup. And when it's built, it's like it's there and you don't want it to die. And that's a really good thing, because building an esport team by opening a Discord server and inviting 5 friends, that's super fragile. And that'll die in, I don't know, after the first tournament you lose, or when someone loses interest or something like that. So this actually keeps stuff going for longer, I think. And yeah, and this means that you get a lot of obligations also. There's like some bureaucracy to it. You need to do a lot of official stuff. You need to give member numbers. You need to apply if you want to go or you want to get refunding for trainer education. Paperwork, lots of paperwork. And we're trying to diminish the amount of paperwork in general for these associations, because it has to do with the activity. They're there for the activity. They're not there for all this board stuff. Many of them are also the trainers. But it also means commitment, as I said, which is super important. So having these municipal support structures in Denmark is really important to us. And that's what makes it really easy to make an esports organization, to get a facility and to get started. But it also means that you have to like kind of do it on your own from there. And that is both good and bad, because sometimes you get a facility and that facility is an office room in the back of a sports gym. And then you just need to fill it with computers by applying to some sort of fund to get the computers you need. You need to find the coaches yourself. You need to find the appropriate structure. You need to, all of these things. Of course, you can do it together with Esport Denmark and DGI. They're giving a lot of support and education and so on. But you're really on your own as an association doing this. You don't have any like municipality-driven center or something like that, which you're going to hear more about. We also have in Denmark later on, but we actually only have like one big one of them. So that's why I'm talking mostly about the associations here. Yeah. Okay, so to sum it all up, I think facilitated gaming is everything when it comes to gaming and esport. Because playing on your own at home, the girls tend to play single-player computer games on tablets and so on. They don't play with anyone else, and I think many of the things that we can do by having facilitated gaming makes a lot of sense. I've written down that you can become an anti-radicalization tool, and what I mean by that is when the place that radicalization thrives the best is in loneliness, and it's in front of a screen. So if you're lonely, you're in front of a screen. Maybe there's also some degree of, if you are not capable of dealing with the social conduct codex in classrooms or together with your peers at your age, radicalization is really likely to happen. And that's where I think if you have activities that is really accessible to people who are really interested in doing stuff behind the screen and who maybe have neurodivergence or something like that, you can build a really early on anti-radicalization prevention tool so that they don't take the track of becoming more and more radicalized by staying at home by themselves in front of their screens until their early days of becoming adults. Yeah, and it's also proven esport as a facilitated gaming thing that it can get people back to work. We have associations who are really good at finding these young men who are like dropping out of education or dropping out of the working market just after they finished education, spending huge amount of time in front of the screen. We figured out that they know gaming, they love gaming, and that's the only place you can reach them, and that's the only place they feel safe when they leave the house. So having these gaming centers and having them come in there, training, maybe a bit of tasks like, oh, can you maybe clean the kitchen when you're done with your training session that we're giving you? Sure, that's the first task. And we build on that. And then in the end, they may be responsible for a team. They're trainers, they're coaches, they're everything. One day you take them to the local supermarket and they land their first job. And that's amazing. So I think it can do amazing things. The last thing I want to point out is this bridge between the parents, the gamers, and the trainer. This triangle of people meeting each other. The parents are often really scared of engaging themselves in the digital life of their kids. When you go down into an esports organization or an association, you kind of have a translation between the trainer and the kid as a parent. And the trainer would most likely be better at telling why certain digital things are important for you as a parent than the kid would be. So having this bridge between the trainer and the parents and creating that facilitated meeting in a physical arena is really important, I think. So yeah, let's build more esports organizations and facilities. That's what I think with facilitated gaming. That's all for me.